This was something that happened so long ago that a lot of details are a little blurry. I'll try my best to fill in smaller details that I don't fully remember with how I best remember things played out. It was the last day of school, and I was in the fourth grade. Fourth grade was the last year in our elementary school, where kids had to be picked up by their parents. Fifth graders were allowed to walk home on their own. My mom would always be the one to pick me up on the last day of school. My friend Dennis and I had a play date planned to celebrate the last day of school. Dennis wasn't in my class this year, but we had been friends since kindergarten. He was in a different dismissal hallway from me. After school was over, we single file lined up and walked to the exit door at the end of the hall where we waited outside by our teacher, Miss Blue. I waited for Dennis's dad to appear from the crowd of parents shuffling in and out of the parking lot next to the doors. Then, I heard my name. Tommy, Tommy. I looked over and saw a man waving at me as he approached. He introduced himself as Dennis's uncle and said he was picking me up. I went over to Miss Blue and said I was being picked up. She asked, "Where is he, sweetie?" And I pointed to Dennis's uncle, who waved at Miss Blue. Miss Blue dismissed me, and I went with the man. He led us through the crowd and was a very quick and jittery talker. He spoke fast and had a bit of a stutter. He was walking incredibly fast. It was almost hard to keep up with him with my backpack on. He explained to me that his brother, or Dennis's dad, was working later than expected, so he was driving me back. We got to his car, which was a dark red hatchback type car from what I remember, and it took me this long to acknowledge the giant elephant in the room. Where was Dennis? Why weren't we picking him up too? The man turned to look at me in the back seat and said that Dennis was already at his house. I was shy around people I didn't know, especially adults, and I wasn't one to openly speak my mind if I was confused, but I was very confused. This was making less and less sense the whole drive. The man kept yapping, telling stories of his days in elementary, asking me questions like what sports I played, what we were learning in class. If I had to guess, we were in the car for like 10 minutes, which honestly, for our town where houses were right on top of each other, that was a while. My house was a 5-minute walk away from the school. We were definitely in an area I wasn't familiar with when he parked the car in front of his house. His house looked pretty normal to me from what I remember. He led us inside and shut the door and locked it behind us. It was really, really dark inside the place, and I realized why all the curtains were shut. It almost felt like it was nighttime in there, especially because the only source of light was a dim lamp in the corner of the room. He then looked at me and smiled. I said, "Where's Dennis?" And he started acting really jittery and nervous seeming. He said something like, "Oh, I think he's downstairs playing video games. Give me a second, wait here." He then disappeared into a nearby room, and I heard a door open and then footsteps descending into a basement. I know my heart was already racing. I knew I was in danger. I went to the door to quickly try to open it, but I couldn't. It had some kind of lock that must have needed a key for. I really started to panic now, yet I still probably held out a little bit of hope that Dennis would be coming up those stairs, but I knew the chances of that were slim. I regretted entering that house. I did the only thing I could think to do. I went to the kitchen and found a phone hung on the wall. I picked it off the receiver and dialed 911. The first thing I said when they answered was in a whisper, "Please come to this house. I've been kidnapped." They heard me. They acknowledged me, but I didn't say another word. I hid the phone under a towel in the corner of the room with 911 still on the line. I hurried back to where the man left me, as I already heard his footsteps coming back upstairs. Then he called my name, saying, "Come down. Dennis is down here." Then there was a pause. He repeated my name, and when I didn't answer, he came up the stairs fully to look at me. He asked me if I was okay. I felt so sick. I was filled with fear and self-hatred for putting myself in that situation. With a trembling voice, I mustered the courage to ask if I could leave. As soon as he realized I was no longer falling for his facade, his friendly smile vanished. He approached me in a gentle manner, but his grip on my wrist was aggressive as he forcefully pulled me towards the basement. I screamed and cried while he yelled at me, promising to let me go if I behaved. I reluctantly obeyed and descended the stairs, only to have the door slam shut and lock behind me. The basement was empty and unfinished, with a single support beam and a dim yellow light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It was the kind of place you would imagine kidnapped children being kept. I could hear his heavy footsteps upstairs, every sound in the house amplified. Unsure of his intentions, I waited anxiously, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, I heard it, the doorbell ringing 3 times, followed by the unmistakable sound of police banging on the door. I would refrain from screaming until I heard the front door open, but I never heard the man's footsteps approaching the door. The doorbell kept ringing and I continued to hear bangs. This continued for some time until I heard a very loud bang, followed by multiple heavy footsteps and screaming voices. I started screaming for help as loudly as I could, while banging on the door at the top of the stairs. Fortunately, the door was unlocked, and a police officer on the other side quickly grabbed hold of me and rushed me outside. There were at least 3 police cars outside. As we waited for my parents to arrive, I had to explain everything to 2 of the officers. The man from inside was brought outside and placed in a police car in handcuffs. That was the last time I ever saw him. When my parents arrived at the scene, my mom was crying her eyes out. The school had already been alerted, and there were cops present. Dennis's dad, who was a work associate of the man, realized what had happened. This man somehow learned that Dennis's dad would be picking us up from school on the last day and took advantage of the situation. He was a complete sick. I'm not sure how he found out what I looked like, but as I got older, I never really asked for more details because I try not to think about it. My mom went to counseling with me for months after this incident. Let's just say my parents didn't have kind words for not verifying if I actually knew the person picking me up if I didn't think to call the police before he basically threw me in that basement. I know for a fact I'd be dead right now. This was like 17 years ago. That man might be out of prison for all I know.